camera? Up front. That tripod there is the camera.
Oh, this thing isn't.
Well, good evening. And then there's the audience that we are streaming to online, which is turning out to be a really great way for us to be reaching more of the members. Before we get started, a couple of key items and thoughts. The stairway over here is not an acceptable stairway for an emergency evacuation. If we have an emergency, please use the back door or this one right over here, okay? Okay, tray tables up. Tonight, you have a town hall forum, and we will be presenting the measures. And we'll also be talking about ballot. So I'll just do a quick introduction, go over the agenda, and then turn it over. Our treasurer, Holton, will talk about the financial measures, Measure 1. And we'll review what's in the budget. Right after Carol, questions on each person, if you wish. After that will be an explanation of major projects, or a discussion of major projects not on the ballot, which will be brought to you by Eric Trower. Eric will be open for questions at the end of his quick talk. Following that, Measure 1 is the roads measure. Mike D'Angelo, who is the person responsible for capital money for roads, will be, as a director, will be talking about Measure 1, Measure 2, followed by Measure 3, parks, trails, common grounds, and the adult pool operation. And Karen Borchert, who is on the Parks and Trails Committee and running for ACC, will talk about parks, trails, common grounds, and pools. And then we'll do a summary. As I said, please, after each person has talked, town hall, it's interactive. If you have questions and you're streaming, you can who can they send questions to? People that are streaming and they're watching, if they have a question, who can they text the question to? We don't have that set up yet. Baby steps. Okay. Well, there's a step for improvement for the next town hall. With that, I'm going to invite our Carol Holton up as the treasurer to talk about Measure 1. Carol?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight, and for those of you listening in, I hope you're enjoying your ability to sit at home and watch us. That would be fun for all of us, wouldn't it? I wanted to talk about the consolidated budget. So this is going to be found on page 5 through 10 in your ballot. So if you have your ballot with you, there are a few around here if you would like to have one. I'm just going to give you a brief overview because there would be nothing more boring in my mind to sit here and read numbers to you. So we're going to give an overview of exactly what the budget measure is about. So the measure itself reads, shall the SVCA's 2018 annual consolidated budget of $5,476,923 be approved or rejected? And this measure is guided by, the vote on the measure is guided by Washington state law. So the result will be determined by RCW 6438025. If it is not rejected by owners holding a majority of votes in the association. Operations this year is set at $2,623,653. There is a special assessment measure of $164,838. This is included in the consolidated budget. For parks, trails, common grounds, and the adult pool operations, which would, by the way, make the adult pool free for everyone in the community. There's a capital repair and replacement reserve fund amount set for $94,750, which includes a special assessment, which is Measure 3. That's Measure 2. Parks is Measure 3. And including the special assessments, it's $2,393,682. So the total consolidated budget is, as I stated above, $5,476,920. I want to just, we have about 2.5 years of experience now with what it costs to run the association and to get accomplished all of the business of the association. And what we did in starting the budget was first to take what has been spent so far, or expended this year, in 2017. We look back at the history to see were there any anomalies. And then we move forward talking to each manager in each department to see what anticipated changes in budget they may come up with in the coming year, whether it be an increase or a decrease, depending on what they can kind of look into the future and see. This is kind of tough because they're only halfway through the year when we ask them to come up with what their budget will be for next year. But we feel like we've done a pretty good job, and we've come up with what we call a conservative budget. Now, last year, our budget was projected to be a negative 16,000, and we came out ahead. We anticipate that this year it was to be balanced, and we're going to come out ahead again. So we are very cautious when we are projecting what our budget will be, and it does allow for unexpected. Conservative job of estimating what that is. It's based on collections of 93%. We have been collecting at more like 96%. So from that standpoint alone, some of our income can be increased by that amount. We're also looking for cost savings at every opportunity to try to figure out how can we do this less expensively. I will say for this year's budget, we had a lot of anticipated increases. First of all, Washington state law increased the minimum wage for individuals. We had quite a bit of increased amount of money that was needing to be spent there. But we also looked at some other things. Well, that was one, was salary increases. We had insurance increases, utility increases. These are things that we really have no control over. We've got to have licenses, and so we were able to balance the budget. Also, if we look at the next slide, please. This just gives you sort of an overview of what the changes will be based on the various measures. So the top section is what you're paying right now, whether you're developed or undeveloped lot. These are the amounts of money that you are currently spending for operations, capital repair, and roads. The total amount, as you see, for a developed lot is $76.04. For an undeveloped lot is $66.69 per month. And then for the proposed special assessments, these are both assessments, not dues increases. And those are $14 a month for the special assessment for the roads and $4.74 for the measure 3 for developed lots, and for undeveloped lots, that's a little bit less, about 19 cents less at $4.53. So you can see at the bottom what the total effect is of the dues or the assessment increase if it is approved. What questions do you have?
What's this year's budget?
2017. I don't have those numbers. They are pretty similar, except so the dues increase. In other words, the dues at the top, you'll see the $76.04. If we were to take the assessments out, that's what our budget was for this year.
So if this is not passed, you go back to the...
That's correct. You go back to the 2017, and we create what's called a spending plan. So if these measures don't go through, we have to create a spending plan, which will be very similar to what we had this year in 2017. He needs a microphone to ask.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Even though you have a great radio voice, you need a microphone in front of it.
All I'm saying is the 2018 is no significantly different from 2017. So if this is rejected, you don't save anything by really going back to 2017.
Yes, we're going of all, it's the assessments that will be eliminated, one or the other if one passes. So for operations, it would be the $4.74 for parks. That is an operations assessment, and it's only for 5 years. So that is a temporary assessment that would go only to parks and can't be spent in any other way. But if it doesn't pass, then the operations budget that we had last year is pretty much the budget we're going to have next year. Does that answer your question? Okay, perfect. What other questions do we have?
Excuse me.
Yeah, on the $14, and that goes out for 10 years then, correct?
Yes, thank you for asking that question, David. The $14 assessment is a 10-year study. Now, this is typical for them. We have them look out 10 years to determine what anticipated repairs do we have on culverts and roads and anything related. So that includes all our ditches and so forth. And this sort of thing is, there are a lot of things that are part of it. All right, we have the one assessment that was approved at the SGM last year that covers the swales and ditches and the overhang. But this is separate. This is the repair to the roads and the culverts. And we have a lot of things that are coming up in the future. For instance, in 2023, I believe, we have a bridge and culvert at Lane that's going to cost us over $800,000. So we have to prepare for that, enough money in reserve to be able to anticipate those expenses and pay for them as they come up, and we don't have to do a special assessment at the time in order to get those things paid. And then at the end of 10 years, that assessment, and presumably a board at that time would have another engineering design and study done by Wilson Engineering. Actually, we have it done every year, but hopefully at that point, the new board would also do a design study and determine what the next 10 years, and the membership can make the determination as to what amounts needed to be assessed for an ongoing repair of the roads and culverts.
And I guess I probably shouldn't jump ahead, but on the Measure 3, you're going to be talking about that on, I think, one of the following slides. Is that correct?
Measure 2 and 3 will both be followed on by both Mike and Karen about what those specific measures will be.
Okay, just a slight increase of 3% on the...
On the measure, yes. She'll talk about that. Great, thanks. What other questions do you have? We have one back here. Two. First question.
Ask that if you're going to ask a question, that you state your name, that even though we are being streamed, is that the correct term? Even though we are streaming, sounds like we should be fly fishing, but even though we're streaming, the people can't see you when you're asking a question, so if you would oblige and state your name, we would appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Marie Phelan, and my question is, what would happen if the budget wasn't passed?
Okay, for the budget to not pass, we would have to have more than 50% of the entire membership to vote it down. So I think Linda Bradley and I were having a conversation a few minutes ago about the fact that this last SGM, we had 1,600 people who actually submitted ballots. If all of those people submitted ballots and said no, then it would fail. Otherwise, the budget will pass.
Thank you.
So it's not likely that it will happen. I don't know if it ever has. It may have in the past. I'm getting no's from people here who have been around a while. Okay, you're welcome. Mike, there's one other individual here, yes. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Michelle Stranges. My question is just one about terminology here. I just want to make sure I'm understanding it. Is assessment a savings? Are we saving for this? Because in my mind, assessment is you're paying for a study or for someone to assess what is needed. Is that what this is paying for, or are we actually putting money aside to save?
That is a great question. An assessment in the terminology of an HOA, and specifically in ours, which is in our bylaws, there is a dues, which is an amount of money that is ongoing, collected from individuals. An assessment is an amount of money that has a term limit to it. Okay, so it is an assessment of money to pay for a specific project. So it's different than what you're saying is to do a study, all right? We've done the studies, so the assessment is not the study, it's the money to fund the ongoing repairs. Now, it does have a time limit, and that's why both of our measures have different time limits, and in the case of the roads, it's only 10 years. So that $14 a month would be for a 10-year period, and the amount, the $474 and the $453 for parks would be for 5 years. And then at the end of that time, if no one proposes another assessment, it ends, and your dues would go back to whatever it is at that time. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay.
Hi, I'm Jim Anderson. Under salaries and wages by department, does that include, are the employee benefits such as medical, payroll, taxes, is that included in that total?
Yes, everything is included in that total.
Okay. On a follow-up to that, the golf income looks like is being projected as about 6% more at 751,000. If you subtract golf at roughly 227,000 and turf at 324,000, that leaves a net of 200,000. And it looks like we're projecting a loss of 84,412, which would mean that we'd have to have about a $285,000 expense. Do you know what that expense is and
Well,
where
I
that's
think I
reflected?
need to look at the detail to determine, but this is a very high-level view. I will tell you, we have just come up with a revised golf expenditure versus income, and it is reducing. It's still going to be an overage, and I'm happy to talk to you about those specifics in detail if you wish in person. I'm not prepared to go through every single line item tonight.
Okay, and one last question. Is there any, under other expenditures, is there anything for Area Z remediation?
Thank you for asking that question. We actually have set aside an amount of money that has been approved by the board to continue with the remediation there. We have made progress. One thing we have done to start with is we went to the Army Corps of Engineers, and one of the things that was one of our challenges was there were, how many, Mitch, were there 5 or 7? 5. 5 areas that had been determined as wetlands. And if we have wetlands, that makes the cleanup process much more difficult. Well, the Army Corps of Engineers waived that designation and regulation because the wetlands, quote unquote, were actually created by laying down visqueen and dumping construction debris. And so they've determined that we can go ahead and clean those up without any problem. Now, we are still awaiting, if I'm right, Mitch? Mitch has been following this, that's why I'm checking with him. But we are awaiting some samples. This has been going on for decades, by the way, the sampling. But we are feeling confident that some of this is actually being cleared enough that we aren't going to have to do a lot of mitigation, actual active mitigation, that we're going to get a clean slate soon. What we're hoping for is a report finally that says no further action needed. We're not quite there yet, but we feel like we're close. We just don't know. Mitch, have we got any other update on that?
No, we haven't. I think you could say that we have solicited for outside funding from other sources than Southern Valley to pay for the other.
Yeah, we do think that we're going to have another opportunity to collect some funding to have that done without suddenly. So that's a positive thing. We just want it to be done sooner rather than later. So thank you. Anything else, Mr. Anderson? Okay, thank you.
Sears Taylor, 22 Inwood Drive. Going back to the roads proposal, we have 55 miles of roads, and I saw that there's I think they call it cold processing, they're going to resurface. Does it show in the plan what the progress is going to be as far as how many miles of roads are going to be did each year for the next 10 years? I'm really concerned because I think the roads are almost at a tipping point. If we don't take action on the roads, we may be taking them down to the clay again. So is there any details that you're aware of as to how quickly we're going to resurface the 55 miles of road?
Thanks for that question. I appreciate it. First of all, Sears, we only have 40 miles of roads. That was determined this year when Wilson did their in-depth study to determine how many miles of roads we had. It was quite a surprise because we've been hearing for decades that it was 50 miles. So, or 55 miles, I think was the number, right? 55 miles? Yeah, 55. So now it's 40, so you know that. This year, we put together the amount of money that we had available to fix all of the damaged roads, or the majority of the damaged roads, the ones that were seriously damaged. And the money has been expended, approved, and is pretty much done now, yes? It's complete. Okay, so that roads project is done. So all of the roads that had serious problems have been repaired in preparation for the micro sealing, which is coming. And for that part, I'd like to wait and have Michael actually discuss that. He's had years and years of experience in roads and about 15 years in micro sealing, and I think he could better answer your questions because he's the expert and I'm not. But I do feel comfortable with the progress that we're making, and by the end of next year, we should have been able to micro seal 100% of the primary roads, 75% of the secondary roads, and the only reason we're not doing the rest of the secondary roads is they're already in good enough shape. We would redo that in about 6 or 7 years. But okay. Who else has a question? All right, let's now, the next person then who is going to give some information to you is going to be Eric.
Next slide, please. So I've been asked to speak to some of the things that aren't ballot measures at this SGM, things that people remember from not from the SGM. This AGM is not going to include some of those items, things like the marina and things like the ice barn, and the reasons behind the process that occurred to not make them something to be considered for this ballot. Now, really, simply put, the marina and the barn, I think everybody, if you look at the barn, the ice barn, you know that it's failing just by looking at it. But the thing is, it is a necessary item for our roads to take care of them, especially in the winter. We couldn't wait. They're failing, and the board is ultimately responsible for maintaining the value of all of our assets. And without the immediate commitment to save it, the marina and the ability to take care of our roads, then we could definitely have a negative impact on our road care, and we could lose the marina forever. So the marina project and the barn project, they're not asking for any dues increase or an assessment to complete the work. And If we had been asking for a dues increase or assessment, that would have been the threshold necessary to put it on the ballot. And so the work that is being done and paid for by dues and that are already coming into the fund, the SURF fund, is something that will cover any loans or any other work that's necessary to get them done. The board has the ultimate authority and the responsibility to make these decisions, and they're hard decisions, but it had to be done, and that's why those items were on the ballot, a part of the SGM measure this spring and this summer, but they are not necessary to be considered this fall. Any questions?
We got 2 mics here. 3 mics.
So the marina is going to be repaired. The pools are being repaired. Things are moving forward.
So this budget includes doing the necessary repairs to the, I can't remember what it's called, the
The
reinforcement around the spit.
Yes, the spit and the standpipe on the piers, that is something that is already in the budget. Therefore, we don't have to ask for an additional assessment for that work.
Thank you.
Got Clark and Sharon.
My name is Clark Champion. My question has to do with dredging of the channel in and out of the marina. Will that be done within the next year? I'm not so concerned about how it's funded, just will it be done?
That's a good question about the dredging. We have, the estimates that we have from the engineers are something like 5 years from now it'll be required. It doesn't seem to be an immediate need. So the engineers will continue looking at it, just like the engineers continue looking at our roads. It's an ongoing maintenance issue, though.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, the pools, both pools need to be repaired, and could you explain what's the matter with them?
Sure.
Or did somebody already ask that?
No, that's a great question. Sharon Wash asked the question. The pools the decks have to be rebuilt, the liners have to be replaced. The pools have come up against the end of their maintenance life cycle where there's a lot of work that has to be done to take care of them. Also, ADA compliance is necessary so that folks can have access to the pools that might not have access right now.
Sue Nuita, and I'm a little confused on it, are the docks going to be extended with this repair work being done, or are they staying at their same length?
There is no extension of the docks. The docks are in excess of the requirement from the NFPA that the fire marshal has relayed to us to the standpipe to be installed for fire suppression.
With all this work that's going to have to be done on the pools, are you considering going with saltwater pools, which are significantly easier to maintain in the long run? I know you have to put in more expensive pumping equipment, but they're much easier to keep in balance. They're much more pleasurable to swim in. Have you looked at all of the saltwater since you'll be going to almost rebuilding the entire pool?
I am not aware of any serious consideration of that. I know that we had engineers and the architectural firm, the pool design people come in and make their recommendations, and we've just followed through with that process. Anyone else? Well, thank you, and thanks for coming out to our first town hall of the week. We'll have another one coming up this weekend with so. Oh, sorry. But we have one more.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep you there, but somebody on a social media site said, and I can't quote it exactly, but they said the YMCA caused all the damage to the pools, so they should pay for it. Can you explain that that might not be correct?
This is the first that I've heard that allegation, but that there isn't any damage that's caused by use to the pools. It's age and necessary maintenance moving forward that we're concerned with.
Okay, it happened, I'll show it to you sometime.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mike D'Angelo, and if you look on page 2 of your agenda, middle of the page, my wife is very proud of this. Mike D'Angelo, Roads Capital Director. I think that means that whatever I say, you have to believe. You cannot question it whatsoever. But someone earlier said that Mike is the expert. The definition of an expert, from what I understand, is the person who has traveled the furthest to get probably in gate 13 or 5 or even 26. So anyway, let's get down to the roads project. Pretty much, Carol talked about it as much as I was. No, I have it on. Thanks. Talked about it as much as I was planning on. How did I get here? I've been working construction, or I had been, till 2008 when a fire caused me to lose my job. But since I was about 16, few years in the service, but for the most part, I work construction, heavy and highway. It's called in the East Coast. I'm not sure what it's called out here. But that means that we build roads, bridges, dams, but I don't do any buildings. Now, we would backfill buildings, but as far as putting them up, no. And I know that Sears just asked about microsurfacing, but before we moved here in 2005, I worked for a company called Gorman Brothers out of Albany, New York. Claim to fame is that they're a pavement preventative maintenance company, and that's where I learned about microsurfacing, slurry seals, chip seals with and without polymers, double chip seals, South African coats, all kinds of things. Basically what they do, what most of anybody that's in this business does, is that you take a good road, and because a good road, if you look at a graph, a good road will go from, this is the start point. The good road, then it goes precipitously out, down. And once it gets to this point, as Sears said, then well, I hope we're not going back to clay. I hope clay's not under there, but if it is, you have to catch it before it gets to that point, and it's way cheaper if you catch it at this point than if you catch it at this point. This point, if you're going to do it, means that we have to do one of two things. You have to do a full overlay, 1 or 2 inches of a hot mix, or you have to, as we've done with some of our roads, you have to dig them up, make sure that they drain out to the ditches, and start over again. Put a foot in of subbase, make sure that you're crowned correctly, et cetera, et cetera. If you catch them up here, you can do a chip seal, which oil and stone, everybody knows that, chip seal, tar and stone. Remember when you were a kid, you used to go out when they were doing them on your road, and the little bubbles would be up there, and you'd step on them and then track them all the way through your house. And your mother would. Anyway, chip seal used to be the only thing anybody used. In Europe, they were using microsurfacing slurry seals for a long time because of the fact that most of their roads are not near a hot mix plant. To get hot mix to your road, you have to be pretty close to it so that it stays hot. It doesn't. Chip seals and slurry seals and microsurfacing. Microsurfacing is a double layer of a slurry seal, and it has a polymer in it. Now, what does that do? Actually, it's an emulsion with an aggregate. And the aggregate in chips or in microsurfacing is 1/4 inch minus. It's been cracked, broken, so that it's got a lot of edges, a lot of little spaces that it can grab on to the emulsion. Now, as it goes out in the back into a slurry box behind a truck, and it's going down the road, and it comes out wet, and it comes out cold, and it just goes down the road, and after about an hour, the water starts evaporating, comes out of it, the tar, the emulsion, or the asphalt that's in there grabs the aggregate and makes it cling to the road. It's pretty simple, actually. But it took the United States a long time to get to that point. I don't know why, but you know, a lot of highway superintendents, if you've ever talked to one, their first statement will always be, "We always done it this way." So I'm not going to change. So it's hard to sway them. But anyway, it's a relatively inexpensive remedy to a nice road. It's kind of like if you paint your house periodically, let's give it like 10 years, or you wash it every 2 years. That's what you're doing to your road. You're catching it at a point where it's not deteriorating. You're cleaning it, or you're painting it, and you're keeping it in good shape. You do the same thing with your car. You go in, we used to go in every 3,000 miles because you had that little sticker I used to say, it's time to go in and get your oil changed. Now the oils are synthetic, so now you go 10 or so, but you still do it. Tire, you go in and pump it up. You don't wait for that tire or that car or the oil to deplete itself in your oil reservoir. It's exactly what we're doing to roads. We are now going to pay attention to maintaining the road. This 10-year assessment of $14 will allow us to do microsurfacing and or chip seal 2 times in that 10-year period. So like Sears said, after about 5 years, you're starting to do that all over again. Then other things you can do is called fog seals. No one here seems to fog seal their driveways, their asphalt driveways. In the East Coast, it's a business. You go there and you seal it. Just like Fred Meyer's, I think about 2 years ago, if you shop there, you'll notice they cut off half their parking lot, and then they sealed it. And it's a great thing. It cost, well, this is 12 years ago, but it cost 25 cents a square yard to do that back 12 years ago. I mean, it's crazy not to do it. So that's what we're trying to do, and this is with the help of Wilson Engineering, that our roads, for the most part, are structurally sound. And we start doing a program that will allow us to go out 5 years, start over, go out 5 years, that we can save some money structurally in the roads, because even if you put in an overlay, then you got to start feathering down towards your driveways. As realtors will say, it's location, location, location. Contractors will say when you're building a road, it's drainage, drainage, drainage. The faster you can get that water off the road, the most efficient way to get that water off the road and into the ditches where it's going to take care of itself, the better your roads are going to be. Questions? Sue.
Sue Nuita. So I've heard comments on social media, and where people are saying that they see the spray paint around to fix a pothole, but that the pothole itself hasn't been fixed yet. And so my question to you, now that Mitch said that this work has been done, the potholes have been fixed, if we apply this micro seal on top, you understand where I'm going? You wanna go ahead and talk-
Yeah.
Okay.
But no, the potholes have not been finished. And what he was saying is that the roads that were in such bad shape that we couldn't just chip seal or microsurface over, structurally were unsound, those have been repaired. But the potholes themselves, not all of them have been taken care of.
So the
But you-
potholes will be repaired before
Prior.
the micro seal?
Yeah,
Thank you.
right. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Andrew Tischletter, quick clarification question. You said if we go with micro seal and/or chip seal, have we made a determination exactly on for sure what we are going with then?
You're going on both. There will be some roads that will be chip sealed because they're alligatored a little bit more, and you'll have microsurfacing on other roads. It's just, it depends on the condition of the road. And that's what Wilson's been doing for the past 5 years. They have gone up and down every mile of our 40, 44, 50, 55 miles, depending on, I don't know where the other 15 miles went, but they disappeared. But they went up and down every inch of the road, and they classified the roads. The better roads get a higher grade, just like if you're in school. If you got 100 on your test, you got an A. The better roads get an A. If you got a 60 on your test, you got an F. The bad roads got an F. Those are the ones that have been repaired. But we know which roads they are, but it's just not, I can't say this road is going to get microsurfacing and that road's going to get chip seal, because you have to be out there to say which one is which. But yeah, it's an either or.
Okay, clarification question. Aren't both of them just preventative maintenance surfacing things?
Absolutely.
So the quality of the road would not, if the roads were deteriorated such that micro seal wouldn't work, then chip seal wouldn't work either, and vice versa. So do we have plans to potentially do then complete overlays in certain sections combined with micro seal and chip seal?
No, we don't have that in a plan now because the roads that we've just repaired, that we fixed from the bottom up, as Sears said, from the clay up, those roads have the overlay on them. The roads that we have now, we feel they're Wilson Engineering, when I say we, it's Wilson Engineering. As long as I've been in the business, I'm not truly an engineer. I just think I am when I'm out there. But they're the ones that are telling us that these roads are structurally sound, and that a chip seal and or a microsurfacing will be the better tool to use to prolong the life of that road another 5 to 10 years.
Okay, so we have not totally confirmed whether we are micro sealing and or chip sealing.
Yes, we have. I just don't know which road is which. It's either going to be one or the other. A road that has more alligator in it will get a chip seal. A road that has less alligator in it will get microsurfacing.
Okay. Another clarification question. You mentioned in your statement drainage being the most important thing. I definitely 100% agree with that. Have we done or do we have any planned work, maintenance, as far as shoulder picking goes? Because as far as when I drive around and walk around and look at a lot of the shoulders and roadways, the grade of the shoulder appears to be a higher elevation than the roadway, which doesn't really allow water to get off, which then causes an alligatoring problem.
That's true.
So do we have plans to do that as well with the micro sealing process?
Yes, we do. The best way to take care of that is you take a grader and you run that higher edge, and I agree with you. If you don't get that off so that the water can get into the ditch, back into the aquifer, then yeah, we're kidding ourselves. But yeah, we're hoping to get that taken care of prior to doing the rest of this work. Thank you for your question. Yes, sir. Sears, I can hear you.
So based on your expertise, with the terrible winters we may have, and I know we can't guarantee snow, let's be optimistic and say we run the snow plows. Is this going to interfere with the surfacing of our roads, old or new? That's question one. And two, have you ever seen those brushes used? In other words, if we used a plow that only plowed down to about an inch of the snow, rotating brush to get it down to the road surface so we don't damage the road.
Actually, to go to number one, the blades that we use when we're plowing, the plows that we use, they don't have steel blades on them. They have rubber because they don't want to damage the road. But a microsurfacing and a chip seal will actually give you better traction, even if the road is in an icy condition, than if it's not in an icy condition. Yes, we will be better off. But we won't, at least I hope we don't. Yes. The brushes, yeah, sweeper, I've seen that used for snow on football fields and soccer pitches, but I've never seen it used on the road. I'm not saying they don't, I just. Really? Right.
They were tearing up the streets so badly that they leave an inch and then they brush with a brush to keep from destroying the streets.
That's a good idea. I have never seen it. And Grosse Pointe probably gets a fair amount of snow.
We don't have snow here.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not going to say that to the person who's trapped on top of it.
Yeah, I know. Really, as far as road damage is concerned, the biggest culprit, and the two bosses that I had back in Albany used to love to hear the click-clack of tires with studs in them. For them, it was like ka-ching, 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 because that tears up a road faster than anything. That's why they try to get us to get off get those tires off our cars in April 1 or something. And sometimes that's at least Easter snow, but it melted, so you were pretty safe. So, great questions.
Please go into some detail on the
Sorry.
scheduling.
Okay, you see up there that our assessment is $14 a month, all the way across, all the way to 2027. And then you add that to the 1729, which it gets to 3129 that you would be paying for roads. The reason that there is a roads assessment now is because actually we already have culvert replacement in place. We are already doing some drainage maintenance. This gentleman is correct. If you don't get that lip off the edge of the swale, cleaning a swale is not going to do you much good because the water's not going to get there. And we already have an annual engineering report, which is mandated by our restrictive covenants. But what we don't have today, is enough money to really do our roads correctly. And that's what the assessment's going to do. It's going to go out 10 years. And if you look at the 5th line down on that one, I don't know if you can read it, but it says 389, and then it just goes across, and it gives you a dollar amount for every year that we're going to spend on roads. You take a big jump, as Carol Hulton said, you take a big jump in 2023 because we're going to replace a bridge and a culvert with that bridge. But for the most part, you're talking between $670,000 and $780,000 a year to help take care of our roads. So that's what you're going to be voting on November 4th. That's proposition number 2, ballot measure number 2. There you go. All right, so I can switch to another page too. All right, yeah, the majority of our road bases remain structurally sound. And again, you're going back to preventive maintenance. The years have deteriorated, you know all that. The replacement of that bridge, as Carol said, is $830,000. We're going to do that in 2023. Multiple options were evaluated for the overlays, which would be at a little over $9 million over 20 years, to the microsurface, the chip seals, what we've just been talking about. And It's a good product. I'm not saying that because I used to try to sell it to people, but it is a good product. And once you see it go down, you'll kind of, well, scratch your head and say, oh, that's good. It's so black that it's kind of nice. It's really pretty black, if you like asphalt. I do. So that she said too, the microseal, all main roads, 76% of the secondary roads next year, and then they start over again about 6 years out. And that's an estimate. We're just picking 6 years. This stuff, depending on the winter conditions, depending on what happens, oil, you know, when your car drips oil or drips gasoline. Have you ever seen it when you pull into a parking lot in any to shop? Right next to where you're parking, you look down, and there'll be 2 divots where your tires are sitting, and then there, in the middle of that, where your oil was dripping, all the aggregate will be raveling out of there. That's another way that you kill your roads. Sign coming in on Lake Whatcom Boulevard, you know, don't let your car spread oil on our roads, because it not only ruins our road, it's getting into our drinking system. So, Larry, what do you think? Is that good? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Michelle. I have a question. Do you get some funds from the state or the county to help along with the roads, only because we're not the only ones that are driving on them? Non-SVCA people are driving on the roads. Did you get any help? Why it's smirking?
No.
Okay. None.
None.
Okay.
No. That's why there was, somebody was spreading the rumor that they were going to have the county take over our roads. And I snarkily said, and this is Audrey Sears' wife said this, I was snarky in this. I said, if that's the case, I've got some oceanfront sale. I cannot fathom in my mind any reason why the county would say that. They're already getting all their taxes. Why would they say, yeah, let me take over your 40, 44, 50, 55 miles of road, and that means I'm going to have to get more people, I'm going to have to get more equipment, I'm going to have to raise your taxes to pay for your roads out there. They're not, and again, going back to where Sears said, you know, I don't want to come from the clay up. I've only seen a couple roads that have deteriorated to the point where we had to repair them. But I know that some of those roads were not done according to Hoyle. They were not done correctly. To be correct, your base layer has to go all the way out to the ditch line or to culverts. And then you put a sub base in, and that's at an 0.2 or a 1/4 inch per foot to get that water off quickly. And then your overlay goes on top of that. And for the most part, again, from what I've seen, that's the case at the beginning when this place was put together. But that's a good question. I wish we could. You could write them. Try it. See what they say. Any other questions? Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, who's up now? Karen Brochert is going to talk about measure number 3 on your ballot.
I'm Karen Borchert. I am not a board member, so I'm feeling a little, different here. But I am a member of the Parks and Trails Committee, one of the founding members. It was recently just established. And before I kind of get into the details of this, I kind of wanted to give you a little background about why I'm here, and I'm excited to talk about this Parks and Trails measure. So about a year ago this time, I was a member of the Long Range Planning Committee, and there was a small subcommittee that was the Parks and Trails subcommittee of the Long Range Planning. And I was working with the subcommittee, and we were writing a report. We were writing our parks report. A portion of this, the research that we had done, was going out and determining the status of each of the 21 named parks. Another portion was reviewing the 2004 community plan, which was fantastic if you have ever read it. Most of you probably haven't, but it was really amazing, and it had a lot of great ideas, and it was really, perfectly laid out a plan for us to have some amazing parks and amenities after the 10 years. And reading it was a little bit sad because none of it had been done. None of it. So when we went to go look at the parks, 2004, they listed in detail the condition they were in, and we went in 2016, and they were just worse. And so what we wanted to do when we wrote this parks report was to provide some mechanism where we could get some forward momentum. Everything wasn't going to be fixed in a day or even a year, but we wanted some forward momentum. So one of our asks was to establish, which was done in the summer of 2017, just recently. And the next one was for the parks to be funded. So that's why we're here now, is we are here to discuss funding of our parks. So Measure 3 is exactly that. It's funding not only the parks and the trails, but also some common areas, such as mailbox clusters and gates and such like that. It also includes the beach areas. It also includes the adult pool, which I'm excited about, and because it will be funded for when we won't have to worry if it's open or closed every year, but it will also be available for free. I think there might be a slight just membership, to get a card fee, a $5 fee to get a card, but to all members 21 or older. So it will be a 5-year special assessment, which means the money will be kind of fenced in specifically for those things that we talked about, that I just talked about. It's going to start out at about $4.74 for each developed lot and $4.53 for the undeveloped, and then it has a 3% escalation, which covers some of the things that Carol spoke about, which is we know that wages are going to be going up every year. Certain things just do. There's just cost of living or inflation, things that we want to account for, and we want to make sure that our services stay the same and they're not going back down, that we get them to an easily maintained position and are able to improve on them and not lose. So by the end of the 5-year period, the developed lots monthly fee will be just $5.36, and for vacant lots it will be $5.12. So a 3% increase on $4 to $5 is not a lot of money that we're talking about. The things included in this and maintaining the parks and trails are things like year-round mowing and trimming and weeding, making sure that there's sufficient engineered bark underneath all of our parks. Some people have had their kids play on them. Their kids are in elementary school now and they've never been up to that level, so we'll make sure repairs to the playground equipment as needed, as well as the refurbishment of one playground per year. So a lot of exciting things going on. So we have never had a budget line item specific for parks, and that makes planning very hard. It's not required to be there, and so a lot of people might kind of be saying, well, why don't we just put it in as a budget measure and not do all. And I want to talk a little bit about why I think a special assessment is actually better than putting it in the budget. For one thing, we've talked about this before, a special assessment actually fences in the money so it can only be used for the stated purpose. A budget, as hard as these people work on budgets, and I know that they do, I was in finance for 10 years and I spent a lot of time budgeting and then a lot more time explaining why we didn't go exactly to the budget. And that's because nobody can budget that well. And so things come up and things that you weren't expecting, and so it's always tempting to kind of, oh, we'll take a little bit from here, we'll take a little bit from here. But with the special assessment, it doesn't matter who is on the board or who's running the show. For 5 years, this money is going for this specific purpose. It can carry over year after year if not used, whereas if you guys are familiar with budgets at all, there's always that temptation to kind of, oh, well, we've got to spend it right now or it's going to go to someone else. And sometimes poor decisions are made. I shouldn't say poor, but not the best decisions are made, because you might spend something right now because you know you can do it in the last quarter and not save it just a few more months and buy this bigger, better thing that you needed because you're afraid I'm going to lose this money. This way we don't have that same kind of we always called it the end of year, just spend their money on something. But the thing that I'm most excited about with this special assessment is it allows for better planning. For one thing, we know January 1st what our budget is going to be, and we know that for the next 5 years out. So we can think about who we're hiring and what kind of people that we're hiring in order to do the work, and it gives us a little bit better quality people. And the last thing is the strategic planning that it allows us to do for 5 years out. We've never really had a strategic plan that was tied to funding, and this is why the 2004 plan, as good as it was, failed. So along with that is not only do we need the funding, but we have the committee set up, and what I see as the mechanism that is going to give us that forward momentum is the establishment of the Parks Committee plus the funding if this special assessment passes. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the committee itself. So in order to be a successful committee, we need to have goals and direction, and we need to have wide community participation, which we already have a lot of momentum in that area. There's a lot of people that want to come and they want to help. And this helps us to spend our money the most effectively, having people that can volunteer, do what they can, and the money from the association be spent on the things that can't be done by volunteers. It allows continuity. As I was kind of saying before, the board changes every single year. The budget changes every single year, but this gives us 5 years worth of continuity. The last couple of things is an annual budget, of course, the annual funding, in which we would know going out, and communication to our stakeholders. And this is what I'm hoping specifically to provide a little bit with my background is to be able to take each month, assuming this is passed, see what our spending is, and be able to communicate that in an effective way to the membership so that they know what they're getting for their money. But as it is now, the Parks Committee is that means that it only exists a year. So in order for it to be a standing committee, we really need to have funding. Otherwise, what we're coming up with, the plans that we're coming up with are just a wish list, and we want to have it be a strategic plan. So we want to set a funding plan tied to this special assessment, and it will allow us to do all of these things. Direction, neighborhood parks participation, maintain uniformity in planning and objectives, and it will also give us the opportunity to report, since this is easily, the assessment makes it so easy to track, we can report to the community on our monthly progress. So those are the things that we're hoping to accomplish by this. If this is funded, the committee will seek for, to become a standing committee in 2018, the election in 2018, so that we can be a standing committee so long as we have funding going forward. I don't have nearly as much experience in parks as Mike D'Angelo has in roads, but I have 3 kids, and so this is something, you know, that I think I have just as much as for asphalt. So I really, I hope that this is something that we can see through. It's been a long time that it's just sort of been in limbo, and I would really like to see that forward progress. So the last thing I'm kind of going to say is there are a few people out there, and probably even more at home, that have been thinking, why don't we just wait? You know, I need an increase to be able to maintain our assets in the way that we need to. Let's just wait. Let's vote for the people that I can trust, and then I will trust them to spend my money. And I know that that's hard, to turn your money over to someone else to spend for you. And these two things are not mutually exclusive. You absolutely should vote for who you trust to spend our dues money in the best way. But the reality of the situation, I think, is this. Even if we got our financial dream team, that, you know, the people that you want absolutely in, and they're gonna The truth is, they could get ready starting, November 5th, looking at all of the expenses and finding ways to cut it. And the truth is, the board doesn't really get to make those decisions. It's the GM. But let's say Mitch is on board or the GM is on board and they're going to start making those cuts. But a lot of these things take time. And so we get further and further down the year, and we haven't quite seen those savings materialize yet. Some things are contractual. We talk about insurance. Well, I don't really know when our insurance contract is up, but most people, it's kind of the end of the year at open enrollment, and so you wouldn't even actually see those savings until the end of the year. Other things like staffing changes, that takes time. It takes a lot more money to bring new people on than to just kind of work with what you have. And if you make the wrong decision in that, trust me, it is a lot more expensive. So you want to make sure that we're doing these things very, very carefully. And what I'm afraid of is, I know that, everyone wants to be good stewards of our money. But I'm afraid if we punt this down to, let's just look at it next year, we'll get halfway through the year to next year's budgeting cycle, and we still won't have actually seen any money to be able to fund parks. We'll still be sitting in limbo, not knowing what can actually be funded, and we'll get to 2018, and it's a new election budget, and we've gone another year, and it won't happen again. So I'm just kind of pleading, because I'm in that state where, this is exactly where my family's at right now, where these are the things that are important to us. And to really think about how much further down the road do we want to punt this. I just hope that this is something that everyone will consider very open-minded, and will be able to think about the community. And thank you for your time. Are there any questions?
What is the total expense?
You need a mic. It's coming up to you right now.
Do you understand what I said?
What is the total expense?
What is the total expense? It's the bottom line for park maintenance. We show what the assessment is, but
Yes.
nobody multiplied it by the amount of.
Right. It is the special assessment for parks, trails, and common ground is $164,838 in
164,000.
Yes, in
And
2018, and then
is
it
it-
will increase 3% each year.
Is it my understanding that if this measure doesn't pass, that money will be spent anyway from some other source?
No, there's no money in the budget currently for parks
and
at
that's-
all.
okay,
In the
so-
past, there has not been really much budget
So-
either. It has been drawn from UDR, which is pretty low right now, so there's really not much.
So what is the future? If this doesn't pass, there's no parks, no future for parks and trails.
It will be very slim, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Sears Taylor. Does your budget include resurfacing the tennis courts and the basketball court by the Marina Park?
No, to my knowledge, it doesn't, although we did have someone just come to our Parks and Trails Committee meeting last time with an idea he had of kind of doing the work himself and kind of working with administration to do this. So that's one thing that's great about having is that it kind of provides this ability for members to put a little bit of funding behind that too, and I think we can accomplish great things.
Just a quick second question. Back in the day, when some of the Canadians here remember, they used to have a swimming diving platform at the Marina Park. Is there anything like that for the future, either at the Marina Park or the AM/PM beaches? Something that the kids can swim out to and jump off of?
That's not in the current plan that I know of. It's not to say, I mean, it is not that detailed. It was mostly talking about getting the parks up to just an easily maintainable thing and revamping a couple of them. And this, like I said, this was what was written as the subcommittee of the long-range plan, and we've kind of morphed and we're just getting on our feet, but that is a great idea for something to have. I think there's a few probably privately owned little platforms I've seen out there. That was something maybe that was in revitalization that a little swimming platform, but that's not, I don't think it was real expensive, to be honest.
It wasn't also recovering the park, but couldn't the Parks Committee then decide? Microphone.
Do you want mine?
I think just in response to what you were saying, couldn't your committee prioritize and decide with, do you want to do a swimming platform? Or, I mean, it's that you get to prioritize.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's part of what the language in this measure is. And that is exactly what we are hoping to do, is to get input from the community and from our experience going out and kind of seeing how these things are used and what's working and what's not, and to help prioritize the funding for the things that are going to be the most beneficial to the community.
Karen, Sue?
Hi, Karen. Nice presentation. Thank you. So with the roads fund, you know, if that measure passes, there's going to be a separate roads fund, and the money collected is going to go into that. Are you going to have for this measure as well? Is there going to be a separate fund set up? And can you talk a little bit about how things will be expensed out of it?
I probably should have Mitch talk about the mechanics of how the expenses of it work. It will be a separate fund, and it will be, you know, designated for only these purposes. It's not something that's kind of just going to the general fund, but he can talk about the mechanics of how that works.
I think real quickly, we had discussed earlier that it was a special assessment fences the money, and so then it goes into its own department. Over. So it's accounted for, and it cannot be spent on the overage that's collected. Can't be spent without board permission, so it is fenced money.
Okay, so it just goes into the regular operations fund, though? That's my question, so this is what I'm not getting.
No, it does not. It goes into its own fund in its own department, and it's fenced. It can't be moved out.
Okay, and so next question. Let's say this work done for the adult pool, that money's already been approved, but we don't have the operations. So does that mean if this doesn't pass, even though the adult pool's been remodeled, it won't be open next summer?
No, I'm not necessarily saying it won't be open. The one thing that this does is that it covers the operations costs for the pools. It's instead of trying to spread out by the 20 or so users that were paying for the pass before, it would be spread across all members. So all members would be paying like $1 a year, I think, maybe even less. And so that because the operations cost is being spread across all of the membership, then it would allow for free usage from the members that are 21 or over. It's not to say it wouldn't be open if it doesn't pass. And I'm not probably going to be the one making that decision anyway. So.
Clive Allen. Karen, I understand that there was some discussion about closing some of the parks, right? Some parks?
Well, I wouldn't say closing. Some of the named parks are a little bit more like named marshes. Some of them, there really wasn't a great use for them. And so when we went and did our assessment, our review, the few members of us didn't necessarily see a good future use for them, and so we said, well, this can just be maintained as green space. It's not to change anything because that's how they are right now. That is not to say, and Mark can even speak to this, because I think there was one in Beaver Ridge that we kind of couldn't even really find it, and so we didn't have a great view. But Mark did, and he brought that. He's on our committee as well, and he brought it forward. We could use it for this purpose, and so that's not to say that it's ever set in stone.
Okay. Well, you answered part of the question
Okay.
when you said they'll take care of it for green space. I'm kind of biased a little bit because I have a park right behind our house.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2004, when we came here, there was a huge slide there, and I've been talking for 5-6 years now. The slide was removed because it was dangerous, which I understand, and then there never anything else to that park. Now it's being used as a dog park, and I hope your committee comes through and you become a standing committee and take care of my park, please.
I know, Clive, you're on my list, remember? I know exactly which park you're talking about, and yes, we will look at that for you.
Yeah, Karen, on a number of things. The criteria for success or the follow-up or the schedule of various kinds of treatment or taking care of these different parks, who's going to be doing that? Is Parks and Trails committee members going to be doing that, or they're going to be following up and checking to see that there's a certain quality level? I guess some of the fears, I believe, that community members might say, you got a bunch of money, but in effect, is it going to be used so that the parks are at a certain standard? And who sets that? And how do we get around? Like, is the grass cut every once a year, whether it needs it or not? Or or, you know, like the parking lot at the, whatever, at the golf course, the golf parking lot. I mean, the good news about that is the grass is so high, you have to take your bottle or can to the garbage can because you can drop it, nobody will see it, it disappears. Is that, I guess for me, since entranceways, the gate entrances are an important part of your plan here, is it not? And there's something to, when you drive into the place, it should look pretty decent and beautiful. I'm always outraged, if you will, when I go to the golf parking lot. Is it the golf? Will this be part of what this will be, so that when you drive into wherever the place is, not only the parks and trails, but just the entrances of our community that look decent?
Yeah, the entrances are included, and I cannot speak for the entire committee right now because, as I said, we don't have funding yet until we haven't come up with a definitive 2018 or even further plan. But the way that I see it is we would probably prioritize first those higher profile areas, the gate entrances, the high usage parks, the beaches and things like that. We would also seek to use as much volunteer effort as possible. And that's not to say that the community wouldn't be doing it, but in order to make our dollars go the furthest, and I think to build a sense of community as well, this is just an important thing for us to have. So it's to find a good balance between this. This budget does not turn it over so that the association will manage everything pristinely, weekly mowing on all 21 parks. It's not that. It's a start, and it will start getting us so that, like I said, the high profile areas will look nicer than they do now. Hopefully those high usage areas, the beaches, the parks with playgrounds, the mailbox clusters and stuff, will also see some improvement. And we will kind of build upon that plan, work towards getting more volunteer efforts, you know, and kind of refining it as we go. Am I answering your question?
There be like a maintenance schedule as such, you know, in some cases, as I mentioned, for example, cutting the grass, oftentimes in parks and things like that, there's a certain time frame, every so many weeks or something like that. These things are done weeks or months or whatever the case is, something else is done, so that every one of those has some sort of tangible criteria that could be checked on, and you check the box. In effect, yes, it's been done or it hasn't been done, and the standard at some level, whatever that standard is met, and the problems, there's a mechanism for somebody to say, hey, there's a problem down at whatever AM/PM Beach or something or other, you know, like that, so that some action is taken, and then the community realizes whenever they say, tell you what, we're spending a bunch of money on this stuff, and that these things do, whoever's doing it, that there is this kind of follow-up, that we are getting our, you might say, getting our money's worth, so that this continues.
Exactly. And like I said, we have not put together a detailed maintenance plan for 2018 yet. But from the 2016 Parks report, it did actually detail some of that stuff. So each park was given a high, medium, or low priority. And the priority translated into maintenance, and as well as thinking about ideas for future development. But the maintenance did. So for instance, high priority park would be mowed weekly, at least in season, have trash removed, et cetera. A medium priority, it might be a little bit less, and a low priority, some of those actually don't even have grass, so there's no need to even mow those. But, it did kind of list out that stuff, and I would see us probably using some sort of similar reporting as that. And then as well as, like I said, kind of taking each month the spend and then the accomplishment, communicate that in an effective way. The other thing that we have been discussing recently is, and some of the parks already have this, they kind of have an adopt a park, kind of the neighbors around it take amazing care of that. And I think they get varying levels of support from staff on that. Some of them possibly by design, they might not want staff over there so they can kind of claim it as their own space. But to actually, to get a little bit more continuity in that kind of a thing. And so, like you said, your park, because your neighbors are taking care of it, you know exactly where to take that. And so there's some continuity in there among how the different parks are managed and maintained. And I think it would be amazing to have that kind of thing for each and every park, or at least the ones that, well, all of them. It'd be great to have that for all of them, in fact. Any other questions? He's bringing the microphone too.
Hi, thank you very much for that very thorough explanation of everything. I enjoyed it. I just wanted to ask, the parks and trails, you said that it's a new committee this year, correct?
It is, yes.
And having money for it be specified as a measure, that's great, because I read a lot of social media, and sometimes I talk, but mostly I read, and it says that the community is very important. And they say it's for the young families, for the parks and trails. But I want to say it's also for grandparents, because our grandchildren visit. But I think it's great, and I think having this measure is a really good response to what I've seen all year from the community. But then I heard you say your committee is new and it might not be a standing committee, but if it passes, you would be a standing committee to oversee all of this, kind of, right?
We would have to get that on the ballot for 2018. So there have been parks committees in the past, and they've been around for 4 or 5 years, and they've done a lot of great work, and then they fizzle out for whatever reason. So we're considered an ad hoc committee now, so the board has to reapprove every year. Is that correct? So, and we have great support from the board right now. We have at least 3, if not 4 or more board members attending every one of our meetings. But it could change if the board
Are the people who are on it right now as passionate as you?
Oh, yes, they are.
Well, then.
And more knowledgeable, by far more
You guys should
knowledgeable.
stay on the committee, get the money, be in charge. That'll be great. Also, I just wanted to know the dog park is part of a park and trail.
The marina park portion of it. So there's the marina that's actually, the boat wet and dry slips, and then there's the whole grassy area that has the ball field and the picnic pavilion, and the off-leash area is considered a park.
And that walk you take around Lake Louise, is that a trail?
It is a trail.
I
Yes,
know,
the Lake
that's
Louise
really
Trail.
stupid questions.
No,
Okay,
it's
I'm
fine.
done.
It's fine. The one thing that I will say that the getting the funding approved and how that, I think, helps us to become a standing committee is, like I said before, we can come up with all kinds of great ideas, but without funds tied to that, it's just a wish list, and it becomes less important or less effective to have coming up with ideas when there's no money designated for those things. And so I think that these two things together, I mean, really, we are at the cusp of something really great moving forward, which I think for years and years and years has just been kind of going up and down and waffling, and this really could be the thing. These two things together, the committee that we have now, getting the funding, and then getting this committee into a standing committee, could really get them all moving forward to where I think in 5 years you would see noticeable progress in our parks and trails and common areas. Any other questions? Okay, I'll turn it over to Mitch for a summary.
wish everyone had as much passion for the committee work they're on as you do. And that was like the most heartfelt discussion I've seen in a while, and I want to thank you for that. That was pretty cool. That was great. All right, just a quick summary. 2018 budget, measure 1. It is a balanced budget. It takes no money from UDR. It spends what it takes. That is how it is laid out. There is no dues operations. There are 2 special assessments. If they don't pass, there is no dues increase. What we pay today, we would pay next year. We're absorbing increases through cost-saving efforts, and it's a conservative plan. As the treasurer mentioned, last year we had a conservative budget, and we were projected to be in the red at the end of the year, and we ended in the black. This year we are projected to be in the red. Our spending plan had us in the red at the end of the year, and we will be in the black at the end of the year with net positive assets. Major projects that are not on the ballot: safety of the association members and preventing loss of assets. The board chose to move ahead to prevent the loss of the spit, which is then the loss of the marina. Putting in the gangways, which requires support to hold the fire line. That's going to be the dry fire pipe. One goes with the other. Barn 6, emergency snow supplies, the pools. Measure 2 for 2018, ensuring the viability of our roads for the next 10 years. I think Mike did a very good job outlining in great detail his love of asphalt, and I just never knew, but it was quite good. It is a balanced roads plan out to 2027 with very good reserves. It paves the roads twice in that 10-year period of time, and it integrates maintenance, culvert cleaning, road replacement, and on-call engineering into one plan, which has been lacking, and it was. And measure 3, well, parks, trails, common grounds, adult pool operations. It's never been in the budget as a line. It's been funded offhandedly out of UDR. Everyone wants the parks, but it's never been an established budget line. Fencing it as a special assessment puts it in its own department, and the money then is tracked as an individual and reported as an individual park item or individual budget item. That was the summary. For people who are watching this on streaming, we will have a means to set up by Saturday, hopefully. We'll make it. We'll take the task to be able to take questions from streaming members that are watching. If there's no other questions, I thank everyone for coming and spending your Wednesday night here with us tonight. Thank you.